All right, man, it's River Update. River Update Memorial Day. Cold and not cold. It's 65 degrees. 65 degrees is not cold, but relative to where we've been in the 80s, in the mid 80s, it's definitely, we saw the temperatures drop. We've seen the water levels drop. And now we got a lot of rain across the region for Memorial Day. Hasn't really negatively impacted much. I don't see in terms of the river. Most of the smallmouth that you're looking at, a lot of reports came in pre-weekend about post-spawn. And just remember a lot of these smallmouths and what's going to happen with their behavior now is they're entering in what's called that recovery phase. Remember, your phases of the post-spawn are recovery first, then migration, okay, then feeding, and then what you're going to find is a territorial defense. Now, what does that mean? That means that the bass right now, for the most part, probably 60% of the bass are in that recovery phase. They're kind of like staging up. Almost like what you see with largemouth bass, where they'll kind of stage up before they transition back into the creeks for spawn. Smallies kind of stage up afterward. They kind of get together. They kind of like pool up at the mouths of creeks or near adjacent to the mouths of the creeks during recovery. And recovery is just that. It's where they begin to recover their energy and they relax. They hang to the bottom. They align to rock on the bottom. They're not really chasing your topwater. They're not really doing those things, okay? Does not mean that they can't be caught. It's just a tougher bite. And you've got to slow everything down, okay? And how long they'll last in that recovery is really dependent upon the fish, okay? Same as any species after, giving birth, right? We know that. From our own experiences, right? And then they go into that migration. Now, during migration is a great targeting time, and it's coming, okay? And 40% of the fisheries in migration right now. They're scattered out. They're in the middle of the river. They're moving. They're getting ready. They're making their moves to where they're going to be hanging out during the summer pattern. Now, why is that happening right now on Memorial Day weekend? Well, it's happening because the fish actually believe it's already the 4th of July weekend. And the reason for that is we've had these 80-degree temperatures. We've had an increase in our water temperature, but we've had our rivers at 2.5 feet depth for 7 to 10 days, okay? And we're going to have it even further going into this week. I don't think all this rain that we're seeing is going to change things very much. And so what happens is you've got right now, you're probably at less than, if you look at Little Falls all the way to Harper's Ferry, the average river depth is probably 2.8 feet to 3.2 feet. That's very, very low for May, okay? That's July water depths. Now, we had a really mild winter, and now we haven't had any real high water events this spring in the region, right? And so the fish are not really aligned to what's happening. They're actually being tricked right now into moving quickly to their summer habitat pattern, okay? And you can get them in the migration. Keep in mind, smallmouth bass during the migration phase after recovery will move 3 to 4 miles from where they spawned. Most of those smallmouth don't hang around where they spawned. And you'll find them. You always will find them groups up in your river system where one section of your river, which was, straight fire for like April and May, suddenly goes dormant, okay, in June. That's because they've left, okay? And so right now, like I said, you're finding them in the mouths and you're finding them. Now, keep in mind, these creeks provide a very, very opportunistic targeting opportunity for you, because as the bass are being tricked into thinking it's actually late June, not late May, you're going to find more of them in those creeks, okay? And they'll move back out during the migration phase, but they may be in the recovery phase hanging out in the creeks, okay? Sometimes the creeks can be a little deeper. Could be a little bit of deeper water in a creek. Creeks don't always have to be skinny, okay? Monocacy, prime example. As a river, they'll move up in the Monocacy 25, 50, 75 yards, okay? And then they'll come back out the mouth after recovery and complete their migration phase, upriver or downriver. It really depends on what's happening in the river system at that particular time, whether or not they're going to go upriver or downriver in order to find some deeper water. Okay, and that's really what they're going to be looking for, is to hang out in areas now where there's a ditch, a hole, any kind of deeper water that they can present themselves in close to adjacent seams or current flow. If you've got shade coming up in June, a deeper hole, some shade, and a seam or some current flow, you're golden. That's where you want to target those. Target it in there with some finesse plastics or even maybe a hair jig or whatever. But again, using it very, very slowly. If you're working any kind of bottom baits, you want to make sure that you're doing it slowly on the bottom during the next, week or 2 to 3 weeks. Doesn't mean you can't get on a topwater bite, but if we do see this weather change and give us prolonged periods of rain up north that's going to come down the river, then you want to go to your spinner bait. You want to move to like something like that as the water begins to tick up and rise. That's really, really where you want to present that. Or, some kind of swim bait kind of presentation is going to be more effective than right now. When you're sitting in 2 feet of water, they really don't have that much to chase, right? Okay? They're sitting on rock in 2 feet of water, and you basically are putting it right down on their nose, okay, in this environment. They're not really wanting to chase everything like they will be probably in a couple weeks, like a typical summer pattern where they're going to chase everything. Because they're recalibrating their metabolism and their body after spawn. And then when you get into the last phase of territorial defense, they're going to hit anything you throw near them. It's like they're either going to knock it away or they're going to strike it, swat at it, and whatever, because they're trying to protect the area in which they are staged at for their summer pattern. And you find that a lot in July and August. Okay? But again, our weather pattern is kicking everything up a lot sooner because of the mild winter and the lack of high water events this spring. So you're really right now going into June, you're really going to want to look at where you would be targeting smallies in July or August, okay, coming up here. And so when you look at those fishing reports for June or for May and June of previous years, throw them out the window, okay? Because they're just not going to apply, because you're actually the river system is actually demonstrating behavior that exists in July, not June. It's almost like June potentially is going to just, kind of evaporate in terms of how the smallies are behaving, because they're being tricked into thinking that it's already July. So it's almost like we're going from Memorial Day weekend to 4th of July Day weekend in the fishery right now, barring any changes that we see coming up with the weather or coming up with our water levels and water temperatures. All right, mates.